I wanted to take the opportunity to use Parshat Korach, a parsha that is really about conflict, to think about how or when conflict in our own lives, conflict in the Torah, becomes fruitful versus when it is only a source of distancing and even destruction. And instead of beginning with the story of Korach, which we'll get to, I want to tell you a story of two rabbis, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And the thing that you should know about Rabbi Yochanan is that it said that he was exceedingly beautiful. And of Reish Lakish, he started out not as a Torah scholar, but as a bandit. And the way that the Talmud shares their story is that in the beginning, Rabbi Yochanan is bathing in a stream, and Reish Lakish sees him from afar, and his bandit self thinks that he's going to sneak up on Rabbi Yochanan, and he jumps into the river in order to, we can only imagine, assault him. And Rabbi Yochanan says, whoa, 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 your strength should be for Torah. And Reish Lakish is like totally caught off guard and says, your beauty should be for women. So this is the beginning of an incredibly fruitful and intense bond between the two of them. In that moment, Rabbi Yochanan actually convinces Reish Lakish to dedicate his life to Torah study. And in the moment when Reish Lakish takes this on, he immediately loses his physical strength. And the next scene in the Talmud is the two of them in the Beit Midrash, studying together, chavruta, a friendship that is one of our most intense bonds in our tradition, where the two of them consistently go head-to-head on a matter of legalistic debate. And in one particular debate, where they're arguing about different tools, Rabbi Yochanan gets really frustrated and maybe even feels a little jealous of the knowledge that Reish Lakish brings to bear on this discussion. And he says, you should know about weapons. You are a bandit. And Reish Lakish is absolutely heartbroken because actually over the years, he has significantly changed. He's become a leader in the Beit Midrash, a Torah scholar, and he has not taken up weapons or done any kind of banditry in many years. And for Rabbi Yochanan to bring up his past in this way feels like an incredible slight. So, what happens next is quite tragic. Rabbi Yochanan not only doesn't apologize, but actually digs down further on their conflict, and Reish Lakish is so heartbroken that he actually passes away of hurt and sadness. And Rabbi Yochanan, in the absence of his chavruta, realizes something. He realizes that through their productive conflict, through their argumentation, they had actually grown the halakha. When Rabbi Yochanan had brought 24 disputes to Reish Lakish's question, Reish Lakish had been able to answer him with another 24 possibilities. And in this way, their kind of ability to both see the world from their own perspective, but also hold space for the other's perspective. They had had these incredibly productive arguments. And what's tragic about their story is that Rabbi Yochanan seems to have not understood this until it was too late. We have in another place in our tradition an idea that's attributed to Reish Lakish, and I think we should read it with this story of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan in the background, with the story of their love in the background. We're told that there's a notion that tochacha, rebuke or reprove, is actually a positive value in our tradition. And any ahava, any love, she'ein bo tochacha, that doesn't have rebuke in it, that's not love. And then we're told that Reish Lakish says even further, any peace, any shalom, she'en bo tochacha. That's not real peace. What is the teaching here? And what would we imagine, given all that we learned about Reish Lakish? That actually our deepest relationships, our intimate relationships, require us at times to go to the place of discomfort and conflict. And that not only does going to the place of discomfort and conflict serve an important purpose in our love and in our peace, but that actually our love and our peace is deepened through the process of conflicting and, God willing, healing and growing through that conflict. So I want all of that to be in the background as we now think about Korach. Korach, who in today's parsha we read, comes to Moshe and Aharon with a rebuke, you might say. He says, you guys, you're holding yourselves above the rest of us. And God said, all of us are holy, so what is going on? We're told in our tradition that, in Pirkei Avot, that any machloket, any dispute that is l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, that in the end it will endure, and any machloket, any dispute that is not for the sake of heaven, will not endure. And our tradition brings Korach and his dispute against Moshe as an example of a machloket that is not for the sake of heaven, and therefore won't endure. So first we have to understand what exactly is Korach's dispute, and then I think we have to understand what it means for some disputes to endure. Korach is angry, and he is basically making a claim to Moshe that he and his other people, who are Levites, who we should remember have already been separated out for some amount of responsibility and ritual duty, he says, why do you guys get to be the Kohanim? Why do you get to be the priests? And we're just Levites. So if we're thinking hierarchically, you can see even, which though we don't follow it, we do have a hierarchy in the tradition of the Kohanim read the first Aliyah, the Levites lead the second Aliyah, and then it's Yisrael. So the rest of us we don't have a dog in this fight. So the Kohanim have this status. And Korach, from the second place position, ostensibly, is saying, how dare you call yourselves better than me? And Moshe is distraught when Korach brings this conflict. He's like, oh my God, this is gonna go really wrong, because what Moses is thinking about is not that this is a hierarchy based on someone being better than another, but rather that God has sort of set up a chain of responsibility. And Moshe knows the burden that Aharon and the priests actually have to hold. And he sees that Korach's dispute is only from a place of self-interest, only from a place of jealousy, and not thinking at all about what it means to actually be the Kohen, not in the sense of, being famous or special or better than, but rather a servant to the people, and actually having an extreme amount of duty and responsibility. So as soon as Korach brings his dispute to Moses, Moses is distraught and then basically gets Hashem involved. And Hashem proposes that the sort of the responsibility of the priests be proven through bringing fire pans and offerings. What ensues is horrific. The Korach, Datan, and Aviram, who are the leaders of this rebellion, bring these fire pans and these offerings, and they have their people bring the fire pans and the offerings. Notably, Datan and Aviram bring their whole family, including their children, and Korach does not seem to bring his children. And Moses says, if I'm wrong, if I'm not in my position of power and responsibility because God wanted it to be that way, then nothing big is going to happen here. But if I'm correct, if I'm only in this station because God needed it to be that way for some reason that maybe you don't even understand, then something major is about to happen. And as soon as he has said that, the earth actually opens up And it swallows Korach, Datan, Abiram, all of their followers. And then it gets even worse. There's a plague that goes forth amongst the people. People continue to die and to suffer, and they are absolutely horrified because this conflict between Korach, Datan, Abiram, and the Kohanim is just going from bad to worse and resulting in further and further destruction, despair, and hopelessness. The people are, and I think we can all understand, very, very disturbed by this episode. And it could end there, except that two things happen next. First, Moses tells Aharon, take this incense and run into the midst of the people yourself. And Aaron actually is said to stand between life and death. And in that way, he physically checks the plague. He stops this conflict from going any further into the realm of destruction. And the people, distraught as they are, then get the following instruction, that Moshe should actually speak to the chieftain of each tribe, 12 in total, and ask them each to bring a staff, write the name on the staff, and then leave them overnight, and we will see who is actually the leader. So it's the same test as with the fire pans, like whose offering will be accepted, whose staff will somehow be indicated to be the leader, but it goes in a very different direction. The next morning, after leaving the staffs in the Aron, in the tent of the pact, they enter Moshe into the Ohel Moed the next morning, and there the staff of Aharon has sprouted almond blossoms. And I want to think about the metaphor inherent in this message. God willing, Hashem is saying, we have actually moved on from the type of conflict that is going to lead to destruction, and we're moving into an era where if you can acknowledge what I have set up for you, which is that Aharon will be your leader, not to lord above you, but to serve you, we will actually see our people and our future sprout like almond blossoms. We will not be in a place where conflict leads to destruction, but rather where our complexity and our interacting with one another can actually lead to growth and to potential. What I think is very powerful about this relates back to the story I told you of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. I think we all in our own lives can relate to moments where it feels like the way to deal with our difference with other people, especially with those who we are closest to, is to avoid the topics that are most difficult, most challenging, and seem like they would be sources only of negative conflict. And what I think is very powerful about all of these lessons about conflict is that sometimes when we're able to actually be enough in touch with ourselves and our own truth, while holding space for other people and their possibly different reality, just as Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish did, those can be conflicts and relationships that don't just grow our love, but actually grow peace. Because in them, we each learn how to be vulnerable with what we believe and open to difference and otherness in every single relationship that we have to encounter. And I wanted to actually leave you with something from our Haftorah. The final lines of our Haftorah today had Shmuel speaking to the people who were in despair for a moment because they felt so ashamed that they had needed this king and that they had possibly put down Shmuel and his leadership. And Shmuel says to them, have no fear. It's true. You have done wicked things. You have done wrong. But serve the Lord with all your heart. Don't turn away to follow worthless things. For the sake of God's great name, God will never abandon you. And I want us to hold this when we have difficult conflict with one another, that our work is actually to find our own truth, to bring it fully to the other person in our midst, and to have faith that actually we can meet one another in our difference, and that we don't have to avoid our difference, We get somewhere deeper when we learn how to actually productively conflict with one another. May we all grow almond blossoms in the year to come. Shabbat Shalom.